This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this StockBox interview.
Joining us today is Robin Birchall, the CEO of Oscillate PLC, following the announcement that the company has entered into a non-binding heads of terms agreement, forming a joint venture partnership and earning agreement with La Minelle de l'Enfant to develop the Duékoué copper-molybdenum-gold prospect. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Robin. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. It's great always to speak with you, Mark. And as we spoke a short while ago, I told you we would be quite busy and that you should wait for the announcement, but here it is.
Indeed. Well, let's talk about this then. So how did this announcement come about? How does it fit in with the overall strategy that you're now pursuing at Oscillate?
Well, look, where this fits in is obviously with the transition to a copper-focused company. We have a strategy where we're looking at jurisdictions and assets that we can work easily in. And we think that, I know, having worked in Ivory Coast previously, we looked at Ivory Coast as a place that is a tier one jurisdiction in Africa. And we're lucky to have some very close colleagues there who had this copper asset that they were unable to do any work on themselves. They have other mining projects that they're working on. And we were able to, transact quite easily with them on this asset.
Good. Now, from reading that RNS, there has been past exploration on it. You say there's mineralization models that have been theorized, including IOCG and copper porphyry molybdenum model that's been developed here. So you need to do further exploration to sort of fully understand the geology. But what is it at the moment at the surface level that you like from what you're seeing about the geology?
Well, look, so let me step backwards a bit. So I did some work in as a chairman of a gold company in Ivory Coast over the past few years, and what we really liked about the jurisdiction was there's a part of the country that hasn't been particularly well explored previously, other than the basic government exploration, and it's on this boundary between the Archean and the Proterozoic. I think it's the lower Proterozoic, and in this boundary zone, you have some quite interesting geological features. So we saw at that project, we saw something. It's different but similar. A large intrusive around which you had quite a significant amount of copper mineralization, lower grade, but very, very large scale. And so when I looked at this, I saw the same thing. A large intrusive near the Archean lower Proterozoic boundary with significant moly and copper shows, right? And that's what you can see from the historical works. And we're not the scientific or the kind of university level work is not complete yet. There's a number of groups, there's some in Australia and there's some in Brazil that are working on this because it looks similar to what you can see in South Australia and what you can see in the Carajás Basin, around which you have a lot of gold assets, but which you have some very, very interesting copper assets. And if you look at the model, you can see that there's a back-island arc, so you have these intrusives, and then you have this boundary between the two cratons, and that's what we find interesting. And that's why we're not sure if it's porphyritic, because if it is, it's driven by the intrusive, it could be porphyritic. But if it's connected with fluid flow around the craton boundary, then you could see an IOCG. It's not determined fully yet. And if you look into Mali, there's some thoughts that those gold assets are related to IOCG. They're doing further work in the north of the country. We'll see. We need to do the basic exploration, as you kind of point out. And if you don't mind, I'll just kind of answer that question you were asking as well. So the initial work that we're going to do is it's fairly basic exploration, because what we first need to do is the work that was done by the French on behalf of the Ivorian state in I think it was the 80s, was good quality work, but they didn't have GPS back then, basically. So the geolocation of the lines is uncertain exactly as to where they were, because they had to do it all by hand. So what we're going to do is do some initial mag lines, run them close, what we think is as close to some of the original mag lines. If those line up, then we'll move on to our next phase. And also we need to do a fair amount of just like good, not quite regional, but sort of mapping over the area, because the maps that we've got are they're not digital and they're in a relatively poor state. So we need to work on just being able to locate those maps better, geolocate them.
And your initial target is something that was actually found in the 1970s. So you're going after that high soil value, that 1,000 parts per million. So that's what was done in the 70s. But what at the time molybdenum wasn't very sought after as a commodity, or just left for whatever reason. And
no, I mean, look, like many things, the infrastructure in the Ivory Coast hadn't really been built yet.
Okay.
So it was in the 70s and 80s that the hydroelectric dams were put in, and there wasn't great road infrastructure. They really, and there was, if you know a little bit about the history of Ivory Coast, they also went through quite a significant civil war, which they exited from only really in our lifetime. And that really put a damper on a lot of exploration, other than some of the gold stuff. But really, with Ivory Coast emerging from that period of civil war and being driven forward by a series of good presidents, has been very significant economic growth and infrastructural build out, and it's been sort of a flagship also of French diplomacy, which has been very supportive of making Ivory Coast a success, and that. That when you combine that to some other larger macroeconomic things, like you got to remember in the 70s, the copper belt in Zambia was amazing, right? And the copper belt in DR Congo was amazing. There was enough supply from some of those jurisdictions that something that looked like this here was a bit too hard work.
And you've mentioned about working in Côte d'Ivoire before. So I mean, what's it like to work in as a jurisdiction now, in terms of working with the government, permitting, but also just generally as a place to operate in as an explorer?
Look, it's really good. It depends a little bit where you are in country. The further north than that you go, and maybe to the west, it does get more rural, and the infrastructure isn't as good. But in general, the electrification's good, and we're not in the far north. They did I can't remember exactly when it was. It's probably about 10 years ago, but they revamped the mining code, and that's really made things a lot easier to deal with. It wasn't a particularly very good, or not good is not the right word. It wasn't a very it was difficult bureaucratically to deal with the mining code back then, and they streamlined a certain amount of that, and that's made it a lot easier to deal with. I mean, it certainly was in the previous company I dealt with. Getting your permits issued, the process was much easier, and then what you needed to commit to, and what you needed to achieve in the first years and in the second years, second set of years, etc. It became much easier, and then just infrastructure wise, I mean, when you fly into the capital, it's really quite sophisticated. Airport's good, clean, tidy. There's a series of good hotels. There's good places to eat and shop, and it's not very Africa like some people think of. It's nothing like Mali or Burkina or anything like that. It's one of the kind of hotspots of West Africa.
And you commented in the RNS saying this is it's an early stage exploration play here. You said it's got a very exciting opportunity. So what's the investment case here for investors looking at this news today? What should get them excited about this acquisition?
Well, look, I mean, there's a couple things. The first off is that copper is a very, very good commodity. It's got a terminal market. It's very understandable. The second thing is that it's a high-quality jurisdiction, which is easy to operate in, and there's lots of technical skills. We don't really need to. We'll bring in our kind of senior control management, but everybody else will be Ivorian. We have, through our partner now, Carl Hewison, who used to work with me at the Bank of Montreal many years ago. We have a very, very good local partner, which means that we plug into his infrastructure, which is excellent. And we think that this, then just geologically, this is a very, very interesting story in a bit of an underexplored area.
You're going to look to crack on with those exploration plans almost immediately?
Well, we actually had our first technical meeting 2 days ago. I did put my phone on silent, but I saw that one of the technical guys who just called me during this interview. So we're planning the budgeting at the moment. We'll go out to contract. It's a pretty small program to start with. It'll be $150,000. That'll be done. The rainy season is coming, so we need to crack on with that like pretty quickly. We need to get that done before the end of June. Then there'll be the assaying and the analysis, and then probably in October we'll go back, and that's when we'll start. If we get lucky and our lines line up with what we're hoping, if we get the results and hit the expectations we have, then we'll go into a further campaign, which will be more of a trenching program, and some further. We'll probably shoot some IP and stuff like that, and that after that that'll give us the information for a first pass drilling program.
Just finally, Robin, any other opportunities that you're looking at here as part of the wider strategy, whether in Africa or further afield?
Yeah, absolutely. We're not finished completely with our acquisition program. We'll see what we have. We have 2 term sheets out there at the moment. We will see what the responses are. Obviously, they have to meet the criteria we want in terms of the acquisition cost, and also, M&A is not easy. Probably 1 in 3 actually happen. But again, we're focused on high quality jurisdictions. We have a very, very interesting opportunity in another African country, which is a tier 1 jurisdiction. Then we have another copper asset in a very well developed jurisdiction, which we like a lot. So we will keep people posted on it. So what it is that there's the 2 streams. There's start the exploration on the assets that we have acquired, and complete finalize our acquisitions that we want to have that will form the core of this business. And then the final thing is, once we've got those in place, we will move towards graduating to a more senior exchange.
Robin Burchill, the CEO of Oscillate PLC, thank you very much for your time.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.